Yun revives 5,000 years of civilization through choreographed dance, music combining classical, Western, and Chinese instruments, and innovative 3D backdrop. Come and see it once in your lifetime. Tickets at shenyun.com/FL.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio.
Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you.
So again, don't miss us
on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show.
We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
The great irony is, of course, that Donald Trump is the son of an immigrant, the grandson of an immigrant, and married to an immigrant. In fact, 2 of his 3 wives were immigrants, proving yet again that immigrants will do the jobs that even Americans are not willing to do.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on The Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Now, here is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Well, what do you know? The Epstein files have been released to distract from all the crimes of the ICE Gestapo. Did you think you'd ever see that day come along? Crooked Donald's frantic to steal the midterm elections because he's committed so much crime against this country that he knows if the Democrats get back in control of Congress, he's going to be impeached every week. And this time, a few of the Republican whores could actually grow a spine and vote to convict him as they see the MAGA garbage scow starting to go down by the head. My co-hosts today are both attorneys. I hate attorneys. First, Kevin Carey, who is also a former circuit court judge. I hate judges even more. And our Voice of Reason senior political analyst, Gary Gibbons. Gary, I want to start with you because even though we know Stephen Miller really is the force behind it and what he's trying to do is create a whites-only nation, and he's established the whole ICE Gestapo to round up immigrants to deport them. I'm becoming convinced that Crooked Donald sees it as his vehicle to seize ballots and voting machines in the midterms so he can rig the elections for the Republicans to retain control of Congress.
Yeah, there's no question that that's what it, I mean, Steve Bannon yesterday said it out loud. You know, we're going to surround all of the polling places with ICE agents. And these ICE agents were never intended to be a police force, but because of the way that they have been deployed, they are a Donald Trump's secret police. They wear masks. They're dressed to the hilt with the body armor and are firing. They're really causing chaos throughout the country. There are lots of reports of them, just pulling up in Minneapolis into a intersection and waiting. And then when protesters show up to film them, then they fire tear gas canisters for no reason. Yeah. It's all, and of course they film all of that so that they can try to show that there is some sort of unrest going on. It's criminal what's happening.
Well, now, is Bannon a convicted felon? I know he stole about $1 million of money that he solicited to build the so-called wall along the southern border, and he was convicted of that?
No, he was pardoned for that. He went to prison. He went to jail for ignoring a congressional subpoena. But they were very serious felony charges, which, like other criminals, he got the benefit of criminal Don's pardon.
But he did pocket the jack. He stole all the money.
Well, He never went to trial for it. He was before the trial, but
unbelievable.
he was charged with that. Yes.
Well, on his podcast, The War Room, he spells out exactly how the Republicans plan to steal the midterm elections.
You're damn right. We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen.
So
Yeah.
believe what they say.
How is that going to allow an election to be stolen, to put police officers around the polling place? I mean, all it's going to do is tamp down the vote and allow people, or prevent people from exercising their right to vote, who are going to be intimidated or afraid to go there. But, I was a poll watcher on several elections, and anybody that's ever done that or ever worked in the polls will be completely disavowed of any of the notion of fraud when you see how well the elections are run, how the ballots are counted, and if any are spoiled during the day, they have to be accounted for. I would stay after the polls closed for at least an hour and a half while the team that was working that particular precinct would come in and make sure that every I was dotted and T was crossed. I was completely amazed by what I saw when I did that work. And instead, you get this narrative of, our elections are fraud, without ever one instance of any proof whatsoever.
Well, you're exactly right, Gary. I've done that as well, and it is impressive to see how smooth the system can be. It's a false narrative. The Republican Party, when they have their convention, they should have on the banner voter suppression. That's their strategy, because they know if everyone votes who wants to vote, they will lose. So, and they've done it state by state. Trump talks about he wants to have a national, addressing these issues nationally, which is completely against what the Constitution mandates, which is that it's a state by state issue. By the way, back on Minnesota, Trump's border czar, our buddy Homan, who still hasn't given us the bag back full of $50,000 in cash. I'm not sure why that's not talked about at all, but he's now pulling 700 immigration officers out of Minnesota immediately, which that's all about damage control. So we'll see what happens there. Elections, if I could just mention briefly, Ed, we did have a very good election in Texas, a state Senate race that had gone 17% in favor of Trump. The Democrat won by 14 points. So there's a 31% overperformance by the Democrats, which is higher than what we've been saying for months on here, that the overperformance, whether the Democrat wins or loses, is within about 9 to 18%. Well, this was 31%. And the last example we had, I think out of Georgia about a month ago, was also much higher, incredibly higher. And this is keep in mind, and they asked Trump about this, and he said, well, I don't know about this state Senate race in Texas. Well, he on 3 different occasions it sent out on his Truth Social the importance of that election, and also they had spent over $1 million on that election. So they knew it was a big deal. In fact, Ron DeSantis even made a reference this week, to noting that we are winning these elections in a very big way. And something's happening. This isn't just hypothesis or opinion. For the very underfunded state Senate candidate to win by that percentage and overperform in essence by 31% is significant. And I don't see what's going to change between now and November that's going to benefit the Republicans.
And this is Fort Worth, Texas. The Senate seat was in there, and Trump had given a full-throated endorsement for this guy.
Oh yeah, called her a phenomenal candidate.
Oh yeah, the best. He was full MAGA. We got to get him elected, and he went down in flames.
Well, another important. You're exactly right, but another important point about that, this whole concept of let's steal some more seats in Congress. Now, this was a state election, not a federal election like Congress will be, but I think it shows a problem they're going to have in Texas. We've talked about the fact that they assume that this, any Latina vote would be in their favor, which is not the case. Latina vote tends to go wherever that particular, percentage of population believes will be helpful to them. So I think that's also a harbinger that that plan is going to backfire in terms of Texas.
Yeah. Did you hear that the guy who was in charge of the Latinos for Trump in South Florida was deported to Cuba?
I did not hear that. I missed that one.
You know,
I'm usually up to speed on this
Hello,
thing.
wake up.
The thing, life. I'm convinced life is irony. That is ironic.
Do either of you think that the raid in Fulton County is a rehearsal for the midterms when they went to capture the 2020 election ballots that are being stored by the state? And that's, of course, where
Tulsi Gabbard.
Showed up to participate in the seizure of all these election integrity, the election materials, rather. And Trump is now saying that there's going to be prosecutions and they're going to get to the bottom of it. And he's still litigating an election that took place 5 years ago because he just can't accept that he lost by 8 million votes and lost the Electoral College. But do you think this is kind of a rehearsal for what they're going to be doing in the midterms?
Yeah, this is the rehearsal for how to go seize the records. Because what happened in Fulton County was that the Trump administration actually filed a civil suit to try to previously to try to get these records. And there's a state statute in Georgia that says that these records are under seal once the election has been certified. And it was certified by Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, who was a Republican, and by Kemp, who's also a Republican governor, and as a free and fair election. That's never sat well with Trump. So what he does is he files this civil suit, and the burden of proof is he has to show a reason why they need to see these ballots in the civil case. But instead, he goes to and finds Pam Bondi. He says, how can we get these some other way? So Pam goes and finds a prosecutor in Missouri.
Yeah.
And deputizes him to have, under this federal statute, and allows him to have nationwide jurisdiction to go in and investigate in all of the states and all of the DOJ 94 different districts that the DOJ operates in. This guy now can do this. So he's the one that went to Georgia, got the magistrate to sign the search warrant. And then they use that search warrant as a trumped up criminal charge. What's alleged in the affidavit to support the search warrant, which we haven't seen because that's under seal, and there's motions have been filed to release that, so you can see what they really alleged to try to get the search warrant. But what they are saying is that there's a federal statute that if you don't maintain the records for 22 months after the election, it's a misdemeanor. Okay. So they're trying to use this misdemeanor charge in a county that Trump lost. Biden got 73% of the vote in Fulton County.
Wow.
Trump lost by more than 240,000 votes. Okay. So if he thinks he's going to overturn the election by looking at Fulton County, he's dreaming. It's just not the case.
He's also got a bone to pick. He's been indicted in Fulton County. I mean, he would have been convicted in Fulton County. So he's got a lot of bones to pick. And let me talk briefly about the, remember the soap opera that is Trump that continues. Nothing is done nothing he's doing is of any progress in this country. It's horrible. But Tulsi Gabbard is one of these. The soap opera is all these, and we've talked about this before. All these cabinet members are all trying to kiss his ass at these cabinet meetings. And you mentioned Gary last one. They all just get up and give speeches. And now Kristi Noem is on the back burner. And Homan took some shots at her by saying, "I'm coming in and clean up this mess." But the Fulton County issue was apparently Tulsi Gabbard, who now feels I'm not being respected, and and this is another way she goes down to Fulton County. This was kind of her attempt to get back into Trump's good graces, because again, it's not about competence. They're all incompetent. Gabbard, Bondi, Nomes, Homan, all incompetent cabinet members. So it's not about competence. So they're all just dancing around daddy, trying to make, and so this was Gabbert, kissing his ass, rushing down to Atlanta in Fulton County, which that's Atlanta, by the way, if our listeners don't understand. Fulton County is Atlanta. You mentioned the percentage that Trump lost by. It'd be a cold day in hell before he'd ever come close to winning in Atlanta.
And doesn't this all go toward his announcement that he's going to nationalize the whole election process so that he and he alone will control it? Like Stalin says, it's not who casts the votes that matters, it's who counts the vote that matters. So here's Crooked Donald calling on Republicans to nationalize elections as he continues to push baseless claims of voter fraud.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
Under the Constitution, the power to run elections is reserved for the states, not the federal government.
Once again, the president's talking no differently than a dictator who wants elections in America to be as legitimate as elections in countries like Venezuela.
The president claims the 2020 election was stolen from him, repeating without evidence that there was widespread voter fraud in Fulton County, Georgia. The FBI last week seized hundreds of boxes of records tied to the election from a Fulton County elections office. Critics have questioned why the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was there for the raid. Gabbard now telling Congress she was in Georgia at the president's request. Democrats argue she has no legal authority to participate in federal investigations. Gabbard is also addressing reports about a call between President Trump and the FBI agents who took part in the raid, saying she facilitated a brief phone call for the president to thank the agents personally for their work. He did not ask any questions, nor did he or I issue any directives.
And Gabbard claims election security falls under her authority. Officials in Fulton County now plan to sue over the FBI raid.
And then the very next day, Trump denied knowing that she was even there, or that she was going to be there, right?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard is one of the biggest disappointments of this time. She was a fairly conservative Democrat out of Hawaii. Was in the military officer. She's just shown, and it doesn't, again, kissing Trump's ass and just giving in to the selling your soul to the devil doesn't work. At some point, someone needs to realize that in that cabinet.
Yeah, she cozied up to Trump by being an election denier, getting on board with, the 2020 election. There are lots of questions about it. And so but the problem is the director of national intelligence has nothing to do with anything going on here. Her job is to protect us from foreign, threats. And here she is running around to Atlanta, trying to get back in his favor because she's been sidelined from all the stuff that's been going on internationally. She's been out of favor with Trump big time. And so how do you get back in his good graces? Go to his favorite topic, which is, fraud in the election that he lost. And so it's really, I think she probably stepped on her own foot when she showed up there, because there's a reason why prosecutors don't go on FBI raids, and people that are involved with investigating things don't go on FBI raids, because then they become a fact witness to what happened at the scene. And there are going to be lots of questions that are going to be asked of her. She's going to be called as a witness, and she's going to be asked a lot of questions that she's not going to be able to answer. And it's going to throw, water on this whole investigation. So I just think it was a huge blunder, but that's what this administration does, blunder after blunder.
Well, it's a symptom of a very unhealthy administration that all they care about is kissing the king's ass and they have no competence. So what we need to do is have a poll, a weekly poll. Who's going to be the first one gone? Gabbert, Bondi, Noem, who's going to go first? Because, Hammond's now, he was in, because of this $50,000 he stole in the bag, he was kind of in the back burner. Now he's back, he's on the front burner in Minnesota, has no problem trashing Christie Noem, because when you have this kind of dynamic, there's no loyalty anywhere back and forth. And certainly Trump has no loyalty to them. And it's like children around a alcoholic father, that there's nothing healthy about it. They're all just trying to get his attention.
Yeah, Tom Homan is the guy who came up with the child separation policy in the first Trump administration. And there are also, still 2,000 agents in Minneapolis, and they regularly have 150 at normal times. So, he's not doing anything to change the thing other than window dressing. And this guy shouldn't be believed. As you said, where's the $50,000, Tom?
Let me be clear. The Republicans are going to get hammered in November. Hammered. There's going to be a huge blue wave. Just listen to Carville. My buddy Carville is very much on point. And then they can stop saying that we're whining, and these Bannon, who should be in federal prison, makes these cocky statements about, yes, we're going to have ICE out there by the elections. These numbers for the Republicans are just horrible, and they should be. And what's interesting, Gary and Ed, they're talking now to people that voted for Biden in 2020 and voted for Trump in 2024, and as these focus groups, and asking them, not telling them, asking what's changed. And we've talked about independents are one, and there was problems with with inflation and just perceptions with Biden, I think, as well as with with Vice President Harris. But these are you talk to these people. There's no mystery, and Trump doesn't allow his people to have reality checks. They don't. They're in these scripts which have nothing to do with the reality. Just like they lied about what happened in Minnesota, so they're not dealing with the reality. They're going to get hammered in November. That's the bottom line.
And don't you think that the redistricting could be the biggest reason that this is going to backfire and turn the tsunami into a tidal wave?
Yeah, the
right?
Supreme Court yesterday approved the ballot measure that California did, saying that's fine, go ahead,
But
which
if-
could result in 5 seats.
If a district in Texas was being held by a Republican who's leading by, say, 12 points, and they water that down to 3 or 4 points, because you only need one vote to win a congressional seat, right? And they've watered that down so much to create more red districts. And then it turns out that these blue voters, the independent voters flip and vote Democratic. The whole state could turn blue. It really blow up in their face.
Objectively, what is happening now that would attract you to the Republican Party?
Good question.
We have a horrible economic situation. We've got corruption. I mean, this Epstein issue isn't going away. I mean, they and we're going to talk about Epstein, I know, a little bit later. But when they said, well, we're not going to produce another 2 or 3 million documents that we say we have and just go away, that's not going to happen. And then you have issues like Minneapolis, where you've got a visual which creates an impression. There's nothing out there that would attract you to the Republican Party right now.
Trump's former vice president, who he was hoping would be hanged at the insurrection, Mike Pence, came out with the Wall Street Journal headline that showed that manufacturing jobs are declining in America, in spite of what Crooked Donald says. And he says we need to just get rid of these tariffs and go back to free trade to bring them back up. And he's probably right. The inflation started out at 3%. It's now about 2.8 to 3%. He's not moving the needle on that. Everybody can see that most prices are still going up, and tariffs are causing that, because if we need to pay more for something that's imported, then if it's locally produced or produced internally within the country, those manufacturers realize they can raise their prices too.
Yeah.
So everything's working against him.
Yeah. You'll hear him say repeatedly that when I took office, we had record inflation, and that's just a lie. What happened during the Biden administration was, remember, when he took office, we were still in COVID, and thank goodness he was able to get, someone in there who could actually get the vaccine distributed and administered to people. But as a result of COVID and all of the supply chain issues, we had 9% inflation at one point. But then it started coming down, and it came down to 3% at the end of Biden's administration. And that's what Trump inherited, was 3% inflation. And he's brought it down to, like you said, 2.7 or 2.8.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, big deal, right?
Right. And we never had the recession that was predicted because the Fed was able to manage it with the interest rates. And all through the previous administration, we generated about $1 trillion of foreign investment every quarter, which is continuing to this day. Trump hasn't moved the needle on that either. He says he's brought in $18 trillion worth of foreign investment, but he hasn't.
The
It's just
government website says 9.6.
and the answer is actually 4 in 1 year, which is exactly what his predecessor had.
The sad thing is, Ed and Gary, you can't have a conversation with MACA because they don't understand the facts. If you said today was Thursday, the debate today's Thursday. So when you've got a cult. But if you look objectively at his approach, there's no surprise what's happened with the economy. He's taken an isolationist view toward world trade, which is wrong. Tariff is nothing more than a sales tax. I just use the word sales tax. So if, maybe to have been intellectually honest, he should have campaigned, I'm going to tax all of you people that can't afford it more than you can. That's what he should have said. So what's happened with these sales taxes and isolationist approach to the economy and world trade, of course the economy is going to go in the tank. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, and what Ed said has absolutely been the effect of those tariffs is that when it costs more to buy something that you're importing, all right, people then turn to try to buy it in the U.S. Well, the U.S., all those greedy bastards went ahead and raised their rates, raised their prices because they could, okay? And so as a result, it's just been one thing after another. The tariffs have been inflationary for the prices here.
But all of these consequences were predictable. These were going to happen. We knew that these were going to happen.
Yeah, Scott Bessent has been against tariffs forever until he became Trump's Treasury Secretary. And now that they handed him, he was testifying this week, they handed him one of his letters that he had written saying, these tariffs are a bad idea. And it was like, he's like a hostage video or something. He was like, yeah, you have to lie if you want to stay in the call.
I saw the gun to his head was about 5 inches away.
Another thing that shows how clueless conservatives are about economic issues is this. The argument was if the price of oil, energy, gasoline goes up, everything else will follow because everything needs to be transported from manufacturer to where we buy it, and we need to buy gasoline to go and buy it. And so it affects everything, right? What is the one thing then that has come down noticeably in this first year of the Trump administration? And that is the price of oil. Gasoline's dropped about $1 a gallon because the Middle Eastern producers are overproducing and flooding the market with too much oil. Why haven't all the other prices come down accordingly? They haven't. The only thing that's come down is eggs because we got over the avian flu, right? But all the other prices are still going up. So it just shows you, if a conservative says it, don't believe it. Make them prove it. Also, and they can't because they don't know what they're talking about.
It also jeopardizes national security because again, these are rational responses, which Trump is not a rational man. He does not understand this, nor do his toadies. But when Canada, you go after Canada and say, we're going to make it harder for you to trade with us because we're impose all these tariffs, all of a sudden they're going to China, which creates national security issues. Are they going to Russia? So it's not just monetary issues, but which is a big deal, which is what's going to sink him in November. It is the economy stupid, as Carville likes to say from back in Clinton days. But it's creating a national security interest problem as well, because China isn't very happy about this. They're licking their chops. Russia, they're going to find other trading partners if they can't. They can't trust us, and I don't blame them for not trusting us.
I know it, and I want to wrap up this segment with Virginia Senator Mark Warner, who explained that Crooked Donald's efforts to take control of the election process is not the action of an administration that's actually serious about election integrity.
These are the actions of an administration clearing away safeguards while simultaneously inserting itself into domestic investigations, seizing election materials as they did in Georgia, and publicly calling for Republicans, again, to take over and nationalize voting in multiple states. When you put all of this together, it is clear that what happened in Fulton County is not about revisiting the past. It is about shaping the outcome of future elections. And quite honestly, dismantling the very guardrails that were put in place to keep them free and fair.
Well, those are words of truth from Mark Warner.
Yeah, it was in the Constitution. I mean, James Madison's rolling over in his grave because they understood that you can't federalize elections. You have to have the states determine the time, manner, and method of handling elections, and we've done that for 250 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's where the battle now, and we've talked about this over the last few months, is going on in the court system. There are over 60 or 70 cases right now in various states where Mark Elias, I keep mentioning his name. I promise I'm not getting a commission on that, but he's the primary attorney fighting this battle, and it's going to be fought state by state, and that's where the battle's and it will be. I'm confident it will be won, but I do certainly believe, Ed, as you've suggested, that they'll make every effort to suppress the vote.
Well, you're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. I'm your host, Ed Golly. My co-hosts are attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey and attorney Gary Gibbons. It's time for us to take a short time out. In the second half of the program, if you'd like to call in and tell Gary or Kevin what they think is wrong, we welcome your call then. And in the second half of the program, we're going to talk about the Epstein files data dump. So you'll want to stay with us for that and more of the issues the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio.
Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you.
So again, don't miss us
on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show.
We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
The FBI's raid on a Washington Post journalist's house stomps on a once inviolable right. American courts have long recognized that the press has a First Amendment right to gather and expose non-public information. But that didn't stop federal agents from searching the home of a Post reporter, seizing her laptops and mobile phones, allegedly as part of a leak investigation. The unprecedented raid is an alarming escalation of Crooked Donald's war on independent journalism. The orange pedophile has repeatedly described reporting or commentary he doesn't like as illegal and has made it plain that owners of large media firms should expect much friendlier regulatory treatment if they bring to heel the journalists they employ. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
If you care to reach out to us by email, you can find us at WTANvoice@AOL.com, and we'll consider your questions, comments, or insults on future programs. It's time for our rant of the week, which will lead us into the Epstein files data dump. This is from Liz Oyer. She was the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice, and she weighs in on her observations about the release of the Epstein files.
DOJ's handling of the Epstein files release has been a truly astonishing display of dishonesty and incompetence. Nearly a year ago, Pam Bondi told Fox News that Jeffrey Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review. But Bondi never actually produced the list. In fact, she broke so many promises about transparency that Congress stepped in and passed a law requiring her to release the Epstein files. So what did Bondi do? She packed up and disappeared. Her deputy, Todd Blanche, is DOJ's new mouthpiece. Blanche is Donald Trump's former personal attorney and also the one who arranged the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner in crime. Blanche announced the release of over 3 million Epstein documents, but there were some major problems. First, DOJ actually reviewed 6 million documents, according to Blanche. He didn't explain why he's releasing only half. Second, the documents he released contained confidential information about dozens of Epstein's victims. DOJ is legally required to protect the victims, so this was a huge failure. Over the weekend, Blanche gave several interviews that highlighted his lack of basic competence and credibility. Here are a couple key points. 1. Blanche said DOJ now considers the Epstein matter closed. He said, quote, this review is over. The remaining 2 million plus documents will not be released. He didn't say why, and he expressed frustration that anyone would ask. He said he finds it, quote, amazing that anyone could be unsatisfied with what DOJ has done. 2, Blanche said there will be no criminal prosecutions. He said no charges will be brought against any of the men named in the files. Blanche said that releasing the documents should be enough to, quote, bring closure to Epstein's victims. 3, Blanche dismissed the concerns of the victims whose names were improperly exposed. He said, quote, we knew this would happen. He said mistakes were to be expected given the large number of documents released. 4, Blanche claimed DOJ did nothing to protect Donald Trump. He admitted that he had, quote, certain communications with the White House, but he says the White House did not tell him what to do. Well, they didn't have to because Blanche already knew what to do. He actually issued a press release that called all of the claims about Trump in the files, quote, untrue, unfounded, and false. None of this is normal. It is absolutely not normal for DOJ to issue a press release exonerating someone without investigation. It's not normal for DOJ to make mistakes with sensitive information about victims. It's not normal for DOJ to withhold documents they're legally required to produce. It's not normal to have the president's personal lawyer playing this role where he has a clear conflict of interest. The takeaway is this: justice for Epstein's victims is not going to come from Todd Blanche or DOJ. These women have been bravely fighting for the justice they deserve. They shouldn't have to fight for it, but they are, and they're exhausted. We owe them our support and our gratitude in any way we can show it.
You know, Ed and Gary, Liz always become our rant person, our rant master, but, you know, her rants are very objective and factual. You know, when I was a trial judge, one of the things you did as a trial judge, Ed, you'd listen to arguments. And so I was listening to Todd Blanche. Every comment he made to me, I would discount because 1, they just weren't true, or 2, they were contrary to what the statute required. Let's keep in mind, I won't repeat what Liz Oyer said. I thought what she said was excellent. And if anyone wants to listen, including Republicans, as to what the statute requires, they might want to understand what she's saying. But the statute doesn't allow the DOJ to say, well, you know, there's nothing else here. We're not going to pursue any prosecutions. And by the way, nothing else out here really matters. The statute says produce the GD documents, and that what's going to happen here. I don't know why these folks don't understand the what we know as Gary and I know as trial lawyers when you tried cases was get the bad stuff out to the jury from your mouth and do it early. This is going to be death by 1,000 cuts, and it's going to really hurt these Republicans because this issue will just continue. I mean, do they think that we're going away? You know, Massey and Khanna, who are the two representatives pushing this issue, and they've asked for a special master to have all this stuff. And that you might recall last week, the judge to the Maxwell case said, I can't do this in the context of Maxwell, but I would suggest you file a civil lawsuit, which they're going to do to enforce that statute, which Trump signed, and he's now completely ignoring. As is Bondi. Just keep in mind what they're not doing. Bondi has a requirement to provide summaries of what they're not producing and also give context to this. The statute did not say just dump this stuff in a selective manner, Ed. There should be rhyme or reason to it, which there's not. And what they're doing is let's show Clinton in a hot tub and badmouth Clinton. look, Clinton was yesterday's news. If he's got a problem, that's not not a great concern. But what's happening is Trump is being protected. His buddies are being protected. Let me make a quick point. There was our buddy Maxwell was down in Bryan, Texas, at her penthouse, penthouse of a prison where she's getting very special treatment and a pet and special meals. I read this morning she's getting special meals. She's not at all being treated at all like a prisoner. I'm surprised she's not getting manicures and pedicures every other Thursday or every week. But she's filed a writ of habeas corpus, which, as you've mentioned in the past, Gary, is what. Remind us, the listeners, what habeas corpus stands for.
Bring the body, release me from jail.
And the important point of that is she has referenced 29 persons in that motion, and 25 of them have. Be very clear about this. 25 of them have reached separate settlements that were confidential, but they paid money because of allegations. So for the DOJ and Trump to say, "Oh, this was just Maxwell and this was just Epstein," is just not true. Yet on top of that, there were 4 other men. So 29 people are being referenced in Maxwell's motion for writ of habeas corpus. So this was a criminal enterprise. This was like any other criminal enterprise involving rich and powerful men. And what Maxwell is doing now, and commentators have said this, and I agree with this, is she's at a point of trying to blackmail Trump right now. She realizes this is getting out of control a little bit. This is taking on a life of its own. And this is the time that she's going to put her foot down and say, you better pardon me now, Trump, or it's going to get real ugly.
I'll tell you what puzzles me, gentlemen, is we're told that there were as many as 1,000 victims in this Epstein issue. And yet every guy whose name comes up in the files says he never had any involvement with any of them. Who the hell were all these poor girls having sex with if all these guys are innocent, right? Who's kidding whom?
They know who they are.
Yeah.
They know who a lot of them are, but they're afraid to say anything about it. The one who spoke out the most, Virginia Dufresne, committed suicide because of all the things that were done to her by these people, these rich and powerful men around the world.
Well, she was sued by Alan Dershowitz.
Yeah.
And Dershowitz, who's told many, many lies. He's gone from someone that I respected years ago as a lawyer and a professor at Harvard, law professor, to being just a shill and a liar. And they're all afraid of getting sued for defamation now. That's why it's not coming out. And suggestion was made, and I don't know why they haven't done it, which is they should anonymously, they can come out with these names. But those names we can talk about this for a minute. Bill Gates, for example, who's done a lot of good with his foundation. He contracted an STD from a Russian prostitute, and then apparently was trying to get antibiotics to his wife at the time, and just
secretly without her knowing it.
So it's ugly, it's messy. In fact, she was even interviewed.
She was interviewed on NPR's Wild Card podcast this week and said she felt unbelievable sadness seeing her ex-husband's name mentioned in the new batch of files. I'll quote what she said. "Whatever questions remain there for those people and for even my ex-husband, they need to answer to those things, not me. And I'm so happy to be away from all the muck that was there."
Gosh, those are pretty strong words.
Here, of course, there were emails that Epstein wrote to himself that dragged Gates' name into it. And here's what he wrote of his relationship with Gates. This is a quote from the Epstein email. "In my role as his right hand, I had been asked on multiple occasions and in hindsight, wrongly acquiesced into participating in things that have ranged from the morally inappropriate to the ethically unsound, and had been repeatedly asked to do other things that get near and potentially over the line into the illegal." And he described those activities as, quote, "helping Bill to get drugs in order to deal with consequences of sex with Russian girls, to facilitating his illicit trysts with married women, to being asked to provide Adderall." But I'm sure he was just an innocent bystander, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, when you see Maxwell saying, again, Trump and his cult doesn't really care much about the facts, but the fact is she's referenced 29 men, 29, not 5, not 3, 29, 25 of whom paid real money for confidential settlement agreements. So for them to say, well, this is not involving other people, it's just absurd. I mean, the fact is that it did involve these rich, powerful men who felt like they could get away with anything and there'd be no consequences, to that. And again, and I'm glad that Bill Gates' ex-wife said this, the focus needs to get back on the victims. And if I were their attorney, I would have them come out now and say, anonymously, here are the names, so they wouldn't get sued for defamation.
Isn't one of the names that came up Howard Luttick, who's the trade secretary in the cabinet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who said that in 2005, he lived right next door to Epstein in New York City.
6 feet away, he said.
Right. And he
6
went to the
steps his
house and
front
he
door,
was
yeah.
so incensed that he said, we're never going to have anything to do with these people again. And yet in 2012, 7 years later, what do you know? He's going to Epstein, to Lolita Island for what, lunch or dinner or something, right?
He took his whole family there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that means.
These rich and powerful men acted like, adolescent boys when it came down to it. There were the emails talking about how excited they were about getting an invitation from Epstein.
And think about it. If you've got that kind of money, like some of these high profile people that have come up, like Elon Musk and Prince Andrew and Slick Willie, and of course the orange pedophile himself. What's the attraction of going to this little island in the Caribbean when you can go to some of the most upscale resorts in the world, whether it's in Europe or in Pacific Islands, whatever you want. If you want a remote upscale island where you can have all the services you want, you can pay for it, right?
It's not all the services they wanted.
That's exactly my
the
point.
problem.
There's a reason they went to Epstein's
Well, keep
Island.
in mind, it wasn't just prostitutes. These were pedophiles, pedophilia. These were young girls,
Exactly.
13, 14. The whole thing is just disgusting and illegal. But them to say, well, there's no one else out there that should be prosecuted, when there's a reference by Maxwell, who was there, of 29 men. I hate to keep saying that, but 29 men is a lot of people.
Yeah, and what's really sad about this latest dump of documents is that the Epstein Transparency Act was, first of all, it said, do not overly redact things, which of course they violated. Protect the victims. Redact their personal information, and there are numerous instances where they redacted a picture of a man, and which they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
And also the victim, but then they put the victims. One of them, they gave all of her personal identifying information, a copy of her driver's license with her home address and all of that stuff. And remember when they were delaying giving the documents to us, they said, well, we have to go through and make sure that we're being very careful to redact things that would apply to the victims. And that was all BS. It's just like what they're doing up in Minneapolis, where they're going out of their way to be cruel and to hurt people. They're doing the same thing with the victims so that they'll shut up and they won't talk about it. And it's disgusting. And there's a law that requires them to do all of these things and to do it in the right way. And that's the last thing that this Department of Justice does.
The party of law and order is not going to obey the law.
Again, I want to get into the Clintons for a minute, but just before I do that, it's hard to talk to these MAGA people because they just can't be reasonable. But I'd ask them, what do you think's going to come from this? If you had a time machine for the next 3 months and 6 months, you think this is going to get better? You think we're going to go away? You think that Massey and Khanna, Massey, who's Republican, Khanna, who's a Democrat, they're just going to go away? They're going to file a civil lawsuit. There's going to be a special master appointed. He's going to get he or she will get all the documents, and it's going to keep going forward. I mean, it's obvious to all of us that you cherry picked what you gave, and you took some shots at Clinton. Big deal. We knew he was a whore dog, 30 years ago. So who cares? But don't you think we're a bunch of fools? We know what you're doing, and you're going to have to pay a price for it. You're going to pay a heavy price come November, but before that, you're going to pay a price because it's going to stay in the news. But let's talk about the Clintons for a minute. We talked about this last week. A couple weeks ago, they were, they were subpoenaed to appear before Congress, and tell me why in the world Hillary Clinton is at all been subpoenaed. She's not referenced in any of these documents. I get it, Bill Clinton. But if you're going to drag his ass in there, you should drag Trump's ass in there too, and all these other flunkies. So what's happening with the Clintons? They wrote a letter saying they weren't going to appear. Then the House Comer, who chairs the House Oversight Committee. We'll have you send you to jail just like we did with the two Republicans, including Bannon, who spent some time in the big house, or their little house, I guess, in the jail. So now because of all this, they are going to testify before the House Oversight Committee. It's going to be behind closed doors, which they did not want. It's kind of interesting. The Democrats, they want these to be open, and which would make sense to me. Just like the special prosecutor Jack Smith said, this should be out in the open. It ultimately did come out. Again, you look even worse because you're the one, Republicans, who did not want this out in the open. It gets out in the open, and you look foolish. Jack Smith kicked your ass. He really did. That committee. You all look like fools. And Clinton, they love the fact, and Trump loves the facts, like they can take shots at Hillary Clinton, who should not have to be there at all, and Bill Clinton. But these are smart individuals. They're not going to score points with these people. They are very bright lawyers. They're going to kick their ass just like Jack Smith did. So this is all just a waste of time.
So on the file dump, a couple more things. They weren't shared in any kind of chronological order or grouped in any way that would make it easy to identify. They have countless duplicate copies of email threads, investigative files, correspondence spread throughout, sometimes with different levels of redactions that are applied. For example, the PowerPoint presentation that was prepared by the Justice Department detailing the timeline and the cases against Epstein and Maxwell, the alleged victims and the powerful figures in his orbit who faced the allegations of misconduct, appears 6 different times with different information redacted in each one of those 6 times. So, it's just, it's the Keystone Cops.
Well, it is, and it's also a flagrant violation of what the statute required, which Trump signed into law. It's like, wait a minute, do you forget that you did this back on November 19th? But to the extent you're saying, what are the chances of a special magistrate or special master being appointed to take all this stuff and say, I'm going to go through it. You get the hell out of here. And by the way, you've noticed Bondi's kind of gone in the background too. Have you noticed that? It's now, the assistant is now. So Bondi's in the doghouse.
Todd Blanche.
Blanche is now stepped up as a spokesman.
Noem, neither of them got to speak at the meeting the other day, the cabinet meeting.
Oh, it's like, again, it's like children around.
I think it was.
It's like children around an alcoholic, a family table where nothing's. But my point here, Ed, and I'll make it quickly, is the chance of a special master being appointed has gone up greatly by the level of their flagrant ignoring of the statute. Again, I want to emphasize, Bondi has an obligation, which he has not done, to provide a report. You don't just dump the documents. You have to give a report as to why you're redacting certain things, which they haven't done. So my point is, I think that there will be a special master or special magistrate appointed down the road once these civil suit is filed by Massey and Khanna, which they've talked about. Khanna said that they're going to file this. So all they're doing, again, is making it worse, is my point.
We're always told that the legal system moves at a snail's pace, but it moves. Do you think this can get done before the midterms? Are we talking a few months here or years?
Well, I think it's going to take time. I think from a political standpoint, because I do like the fact we have an intersection of law and politics in this discussion. I think as a matter of politics, it can drag on for all it's worth, because I think it's going to just drag the Republicans down, and we're going to gain control of the House and maybe even the Senate in November. But from the victim standpoint, that's where I am concerned that this is dragged on. But they've been waiting for years for this already. So, but yes, the court system certainly does take time.
Yeah. And isn't this really bringing us back full circle to where we began, that the administration realizes that it can take such a bloodbath in the midterms that they're going to go to any extreme they can come up with, regardless of what legal or not, to try to take control of these elections and rig them so that the Republicans remain in control. It's interesting how it seems like Trump always is telling us that the elections are corrupt when he loses, but there's never any corruption when he wins. And he can never explain exactly how that corruption takes place. Actually, he did. He's asserting that illegal immigrants come in and just register and vote by the millions. But as we know, there's extremely few cases of that actually ever happening, because it's just so difficult to do it.
Trump is bragging that there's been no smoking gun in there, but there are a number of emails that we can talk about in the second hour that are problematic for him.
Well, that, and remember that corruption in the Republican crime syndicate is not limited to the federal government. When we come back in the second hour, we're going to talk about what's going on right here in the Sunshine State and how much corruption the DeSantis administration is mixed up in. You're listening to The Voice of Reason. We're going to take a quick time out for national and international news, and then we'll be back with the second half of the program. Ed Golly with Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
Your home for original reporting.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. Russia's defense ministry has released a video showing a group of newly freed Russian POWs boarding a bus in Belarus territory after a prisoner exchange with Ukraine. It comes amid word from the Pentagon the U.S. and Russia have agreed to reestablish high-level military-to-military dialogue following Ukraine peace talks in Abu Dhabi. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports from Kyiv.
President Zelensky said, look, Russia is not winning on the battlefield, and if it wants that land through military action, it will take Russia 2 years at the current rate, and it would cost 800,000 more dead soldiers. So he's making the point that, Russia's pressure is one thing in words, but in reality on the ground, although there is progress by Russia moving forward extremely slowly, it's costing hugely. And President Zelensky is saying to Ukraine's Western allies, give us more support.
Hundreds of friends and neighbors gathered inside an Episcopal church in Tucson last night for a vigil for their neighbor, Nancy Guthrie, a mother of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie.
I do believe in the power of prayer.
We wanted to show the support that Tucson has for her in the community.
The 84-year-old's been missing since last weekend. Correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is in Tucson.
Analysis continues. The FBI looking into the IP address of that email. There's also just a lot of question about what other lines of communication were opened up in that letter. It does not appear to be that there is a way for the family to reach out to the abductors at this hour.
President Trump standing behind his Homeland Security Secretary a day after his border czar announced 700 federal immigration agents and officers would be leaving Minneapolis.
Are you going to relieve Kristi Noem of her duties? No. Oh. I said, why would I do that? We have the strongest border in the history of our country.
He spoke at a prayer breakfast today. The British Prime Minister is apologizing to Jeffrey Epstein's victims for choosing Peter Mandelson as UK ambassador to Washington. Those files released last week showed Mandelson maintained his friendship with Epstein after he was convicted of child sex offenses. PM Keir Starmer.
Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him.
Mandelson claimed he barely knew Epstein. Pizza Hut fan, it'll be tougher to find a pie.
Pizza Hut!
The chain is closing about 250 stores across the country because of slow sales. Dow down 297 in early trading. This is CBS News.
Follow and listen to CBS Mornings on the go on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Downtown Dave. How would you like to be able to promote yourself, your business, or someone else's business for less than the cost of one 60-second commercial on many Tampa Bay radio stations? Here's the deal. You can have your own 1-hour radio program on the Tan Talk Network for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many Tampa Bay stations. Your program will be on 2 Tampa Bay radio stations and will cover 4 million people in Florida, plus worldwide on the internet in both audio and video. And you'll have a web link for your business on the Tan Talk 1340 website. We provide the producer, the state-of-the-art equipment, free production of commercials, and much more. Check it out today. Call Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at 727-510-7622. That's 510-7622. Call Lola O'Brien now, 727-510-7622. Call now and your 1-hour radio program can start tomorrow. Call 510-7622 for Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Shenyun 2026 are coming to the Tampa Bay area February the 6th to the 8th at Mahaffey Theater, St. Petersburg. Shenyun revives 5,000 years of civilization through choreographed dance, music combining classical, Western, and Chinese instruments, and innovative 3D backdrop. Come and see it once in your lifetime. Tickets at shenyun.com/FL.
Join us, Glenn Schultz,
and co-host Berkeley Badger on SVA Live.
Wednesday mornings, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m.
It will be an informative 2 hours
that are vital to your health, wealth, and well-being.
Also, get ready for an opportunity to win great prizes.
And join in community events. That's SVA Live with Berkeley and Glenn.
Wednesdays, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m.
on SVAI Radio on AM 1340 and FM 106.1 WTAN.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with The Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now, the voice of reason continues here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Here again is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Along with me, Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey, Florida's Department of Government Efficiency, which is a DeSantis administration task force created to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in local government, released a sweeping report last week that identified no cases of fraud, but accused local governments of squandering millions of dollars on diversity and climate initiatives. Well, DeSantis and his Lieutenant Governor Collins knew about aviation safety issues and budget overruns by the Florida State Guard almost a year before those accusations became public last month, but fired the informant who warned them, according to records obtained by the Orlando Sentinel. So much for government in the sunshine, huh? James Etheridge, a retired Navy commander, was hired in March to analyze and fix safety issues with the Guard's Aviation Response Squadron. He quickly provided a report that detailed severe safety violations and mismanagement that meant millions of dollars wasted, $4 million spent on aircraft parts that didn't need to be purchased. I think we call that waste and fraud, don't we? I mean, if DeSantis really wants to uncover waste and fraud in Florida, all he's got to do is look under his own bed.
Yeah,
That's
look
right.
in the mirror.
Yeah. And then, of course, they fire the guys that expose it. His administration kept, the DeSantis administration, that is, kept the concerns of this whistleblower and other Guard employers under wraps until January, when the Sentinel finally broke the news that senior officers, pilots, and soldiers were leaving the agency after alleging misuse of taxpayer dollars, unreported sexual harassment claims, and poor planning and budgeting by the agency's top executives. And that's not all. We all know about the Hope, Florida operation going on. That scandal isn't going away. 2 years after the DeSantis administration steered nearly $10 million from a Medicaid settlement to a political campaign, the House Republican who followed the money is pushing legislation to stop future administrations from doing something similar. That's Representative Alex Andrade's bill, which was passed unanimously last week by the House Government Operations Subcommittee, which is the first panel to have heard it. It has one more committee to go before a full vote by the House, Kevin, indicating that it's a priority for leadership. And a similar bill in the Senate is there, but it hasn't been heard yet.
Yeah, there are a couple of good things that I want to mention, and one of them is about Andrade. He really has stepped up, and you mentioned it was unanimously approved in the subcommittee. I think enough publicity has come out about this that it's going to be hard for there to be much pushback. Most, a casual observer can see what happened, including what I think was criminal. Uhlfelder loves to Youthmeyer, one of those Youthmeyer, loves to challenge. How dare they question me what I did as chief of staff under DeSantis? But all those abuses would be prevented. I think you had asked here would there been a Senate companion bill. I think there has been, but I'm not sure who in the Senate is championing this. The president of the Senate, unlike the House Speaker, is tied to DeSantis. The House Speaker and DeSantis are at odds with each other. But there's also Maxwell, Scott Maxwell in the Orlando, and I think you mentioned this, and Andrade's involved with this too, is pushing. I mean, the fact that we as the government of sunshine, under Childs and under Bob Graham and Ruben Askew, it's become a joke. There's no sunshine in terms of access to records in this state now, and so there is I think there is finally some positive moves in the direction of bringing some of that back. But because DeSantis, who's like Trump, he wants nothing out in the sunshine because what's happening are shenanigans that are illegal.
Yeah, there have been so many violations of the government and the Sunshine Law by this administration. Including using Gmail accounts to send emails to each other, which violates the state law because you're supposed to use a state email account there, and those records are supposed to be preserved in perpetuity. But they always seem to go around, just like the federal administration. All those guys like to use signal chats rather than using the actual approved forms of communication. But I really think this state guard thing is really out of control, and that there's been a misuse of the assets that have been appropriated thus far. The executive director, Mark Thieme, Thieme, used state-owned planes and personnel to rack up $100,000 of flight time for his personal private's license. But if that's not enough, then he ordered roughly $4 million of unnecessary aircraft parts to exhaust the agency's budget for the year so that he wouldn't have to send any money back. And now they've asked for double the amount of the budget this year. The whistleblower that you mentioned, James Etheridge, he warned the administration about what was going on and all the aviation safety issues and budget overruns. But rather than acting on those, they fire the guy. There's problems with sexual harassment, federal lawsuits that have been filed by a female guard member claiming that she was targeted by a male supervisor and subsequently retaliated against for reporting it. I mean, it's a nightmare organization that's really DeSantis's own personal police force. He wants to have this thing.
In answer to your question, there is this companion bill, State Bill 770 in the Senate. Ben Albritton is the Senate president, so I would urge our listeners or anyone watching us on YouTube and whatnot to push this issue with Albritton because that legislation is a very positive piece of legislation and needs to go forward.
And make no mistake about it, the Senate president and the Speaker of the House control what gets to the floor. They can kill a bill if they want to kill it. So the pressure needs to be applied to Ben Albritton, Senate President.
Yeah, that's the name we want to have our listeners kind of take with them away. And the House Speaker, to his credit, what's his name again, Gary? House Speaker.
Daniel Perez.
Yeah, to his credit, he's stood up and he's pushed back, and consequently, like a mini Trump dictator, the governor is mad at him, won't even return his phone calls.
Wouldn't even shake his hand at the State of the State address. Yeah, he walked in, embraced Albritton, gave him the big hug, and handshake, and then just ignored Perez, which just tells you all you need to know about Ron DeSantis.
Well, it seems to me that what might be underlying all this is the fact that DeSantis doesn't have a rap sheet, and so he needs to engage in some serious corruption in order to keep his political career alive in the party of law and order. Remember, Ripoff Rick stole $300 million from Medicaid and Medicare. The hospital that he'd run was assessed the biggest fine in the history of Medicare for fraud. It was something like $1.7 billion. What happened to him? He went straight to the governor's mansion with no experience in government. He didn't even know that the governor signs death warrants. Somebody put one on the desk one day and he said, "What the heck is this?"
Well, this is someone
Guess what? And now he's a United States senator.
In a deposition, he took the fifth, over 100 times?
Yeah.
75 times.
Close to 100.
And of course, Trump, 34 felony convictions, sexual assault, the tax cheat. He goes straight to the White House. DeSantis made it through one primary when he ran against Trump. And because he ran against Trump, Trump is not probably going to endorse him for anything anymore. He doesn't like him. He doesn't want anybody to oppose him. And that's the only reason DeSantis became the governor, is because Trump endorsed him. So the Republican voters do what they're told. They're a bunch of lemmings who vote for whoever Trump tells them to vote for, and that's how he ends up in the governor's mansion. Byron Donalds has a felony arrest in his background. He's running for governor. He's raising millions of dollars, so he's going to have a respectable shot at it. But think about this. The most corrupt politician in Texas must be Ken Paxton, right? He's the attorney general of the state of Texas. Just to make my point, he's running against John Cornyn. He spent years under clouds that include felony securities fraud charges and an investigation by, are you ready for this one? The Texas State Bar over his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The federal investigation has been the most serious inquiry still facing him, who settled the securities fraud and was acquitted of corruption charges in the Texas Senate following an historic impeachment. The guy is a Republican who was impeached by the Republican Senate in one of the reddest states in the country. Now, how corrupt do you need to be to get that kind of a box checked on your rap sheet, right?
You're talking about Texas. Those of us who enjoy the art of politics and the dance of politics. You've got John Cornyn, who's a U.S. senator and was also a state Supreme Court justice in the state of Texas before he became a U.S. senator. And Cornyn, I think, he's tried to do a decent job. I don't think he's corrupt. I don't agree with all his politics, but he's going to get his ass kicked by your buddy Paxton,
Isn't that something?
And that's going to be next month in March.
And it was the same thing as happened here. What you were just talking about, Gary, how the whistleblowers get fired because all these allegations against Paxton resulted in 8 of his closest aides who ratted him out to the FBI in 2020, accusing him of bribery and abusing his office to help one of his friends and campaign contributors, I should say, a guy named Nate Paul. They all got fired. He employed a woman with whom Paxton acknowledged having had an extramarital affair. So now he's in tight with the party of Christian family values, right? And,
what's interesting there, Ed, is in terms of the general election in November, I think one would have to argue, or one could acknowledge, that a Democrat probably has a better chance against Paxton than Cornyn, because Paxton is a little more of a lightning rod. Cornyn, I think, would have gotten easily reelected. The problem he has is in the primary with Paxton. Now, whether that be enough, so I think as a Democrat, my point is, I think we'd rather run against Paxton than Cornyn because he is so controversial and he's got such a history of problems. Whether it's enough to get a Democrat, over the finish line is another question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they're probably going to destroy each other in their primary because they're fighting with each other. And in typical Democratic fashion, they have the circular firing squad set up. And it's a shame because that's a seat that is ripe for taking this time if they don't otherwise self-implode.
I spent a lot of time listening the other day to the gentleman, I think he's in the state house there. That's the candidate. I can't recall his name.
Farrow.
He's an impressive guy.
He's very impressive.
Very thoughtful. So we'll see.
Want more? How about Alligator Alcatraz? Federal and state officials withheld evidence that the Department of Homeland Security had agreed to reimburse Florida for some of the costs of constructing the concentration camp. The Everglades facility remains open, still holding detainees because an appellate court in early September relied on arguments by Florida and the Trump administration that the state had not yet applied for federal reimbursement and therefore wasn't required to follow federal environmental law. But the new evidence, which is emails and documents obtained through public records requests, shows that officials had discussed federal reimbursement in June, 3 months earlier, and that the Federal Emergency Management Agency confirmed in early August that it had received from state officials a grant application. Florida was notified in late September that FEMA had approved $608 million in federal funding to support the center's construction and operation.
Well, that shouldn't have been a surprise either because DeSantis made that point. The first thing he said to the voters was we're not going to pay for this. We're just going to front the money and we'll be reimbursed. So I'm not surprised the emails support that point.
Yeah, they're playing games. The feds and the state are playing this game of who has the money. Where it's a shell game, and they approved the funding for $608 million back in September, but yet as late as January 8th of this year. Despite the approval of the FEMA grant, legal documents that the state filed said that Florida's not yet received the money, leading disputes in court over whether the funding is yet unrealized or merely delayed. And as a result of that, they're able to continue to argue to the court, it's not a federally funded project. And so this environmental review that is required under federal law that the trial judge actually based her decision on, needed to happen. And that's why she shut it down. And instead they're just playing games with it and saying, oh, we don't have the money yet. So it hadn't been funded. Well, and at some point you would hope that the 11th Circuit would say enough. I'm sick of you people lying to us. We are judges. This is a court of law, and you don't come in here and play these types of games. But so far, they're not being held accountable by the appellate courts.
Well, the last point you made is important. When the Indian tribe down there sued because they were ignoring the environmental requirements. This is stuck in the middle of the Everglades. A horrible, horrible abuse of our environmental statutes and laws down there and regulations. And so that was used as this excuse not to comply with environmental laws. And regardless of party, you should be concerned about what's happening with the Everglades down there. So, and that was that. It was just a volleyball game, Gary, back and forth. Well, they haven't gotten the funds yet. When they had made the point, I'm not sure why the judge didn't follow this point. They had said they were going to pursue reimbursement, and these emails that have since come out have confirmed that. So I don't know why the judge didn't step up and say, we know this is what's happening here. And we're not going to give you a free pass on these environmental problems by that point.
The appellate court should simply lift the stay that they granted back in August.
Well, the federal appellate courts have shown in the last year that they have no courage. The federal district courts have stepped up, and in fact, as we've talked about, Gary, the federal appellate court up north, who's telling judges not to even hold hearings which is that doesn't happen. You don't tell a judge not to hold a hearing.
It used to not happen.
In the normal course of events, that's true.
But see, those of us who make an honest living wonder why aren't there perjury charges being brought against these lawyers who walk into a court and blatantly and provably lie to these judges? I'm just kidding you guys, but it's hard for me to understand that. If we can prove that they were lying under oath, it seems like perjury is so rarely prosecuted. Am I right?
Yeah. Did you see the story this week of the DOJ lawyer who was being grilled by a judge because of all the misstatements that have been made in some of these immigration cases? And finally, she broke down and said, "This job sucks. It sucks." I'm being.
Who said, the judge or the lawyer?
The lawyer said
Because
it to the judge. My job sucks because she's been
compelled to
put up there
Yep.
to lie to the judge. She knows it's wrong, and yet they're doing it. And finally, when they're caught in these lies, they're having to say, maybe she looked in the mirror that morning.
The truth can get you fired too. You know what happened to Chris Krebs? You remember he came into the Trump administration to monitor the 2020 election, and when it was finished, he announced that it was the most secure election in history of the country.
Yeah,
he didn't come to work the next
because
day.
the states know how to do the elections.
Yeah, that's right.
For 250 years.
Now, you asked about why they aren't being prosecuted at a minimum.
Yes.
These are lawyers that should be facing sanctions from the Florida Bar and the Florida Supreme Court. We had Justice Tannenbaum on last week discuss that's a big part of what they do is police the over 100,000 lawyers in Florida, and it should be addressed at the various state Supreme Courts. And that did happen back in 2020 when these lawyers were being disbarred. But then the Supreme Court, the Florida Bar, gives Matt Gaetz basically a free pass last week. So don't
And Pam Bondi.
Yeah, so it's preferential a little bit, but in theory, you're correct, Ed. It's a very serious charge to lie to a judge.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, speaking of local issues, did you see that retired Army Brigadier General Leela Gray had announced her run for Ana Luna's Pinellas County seat this week, and apparently is going to pose a significant threat to that seat, especially in light of what's going on nationwide with the potential blue wave. Well, let's try to get her on the show and see what she has to say.
What's happening?
You take charge of that, Gary.
Okay.
See if you can get her on the phone. You got some pull.
We talked about, Vindman is now challenging Moody as well for the U.S. Senate seat. So what you're seeing is some sense of hope that you can win a statewide race in Florida where you might not have thought that. Vern Buchanan, who's been a House member for years, is retiring. Now that's down near Fort Myers is a red area, but you're seeing opportunities. These are, Vindman is a named candidate. This person was a brigadier general. Apparently she was in the Army and the Air Force, which I've never seen that. But looking at her record, it's a very strong record.
Yeah, I think that Vern Buchanan retirement is a interesting thing because he could have been reelected there as long as he wanted to be. That's a very secure seat for him. But I think he recognizes that being in the minority up in Congress is not a fun job at all. So I think that's a precursor for what we're
well,
going to see.
Trump whines about everything. He better get his helmet on, for this is going to change when the House becomes run by the Democrats in next January.
Yeah, he's said it outwardly. They're just going to impeach me again. And I think
Rightfully
it's going to
so.
be worse than that. They may start looking at some of these financial enrichment of him and his family that has occurred at unprecedented. I hate to use that word.
Well, the fact that they keep whining about Hunter Biden with the amount of money that these children of Trump has made tied to these countries, where it's been tied to policy issues, not just money. It's affected relationships between countries. It's just corrupt.
I hear conservatives say it's not an issue because Trump is so brilliant. He can run the countries, this country, plus all of his business empire because he's so skilled and so experienced. But the problem is the emoluments clause says, no, you don't run your businesses when you're in the White House because of the conflict of interest that it can cause. We all know, remember that Jimmy Carter put his peanut farm, just a dumb peanut farm, into a blind trust when he was the president, because he didn't want any impression of impropriety as president.
This is a president who he operates as if there's no law on anything.
And the trouble is the whores that represent the Republican Party in this country let him get away with it. They took an oath of office to defend this Constitution, and that means they're supposed to uphold it.
And I think
they don't do it.
That's the bigger story too. We all know what a nightmare Trump was, but the level of of allowing this has been horrible.
So why take an oath if you're not going to subscribe to it, right? And I also wanted to ask each of you if you think that, as I understand it, DeSantis is going to call for redistricting in Florida in another month or two, right?
In April.
And
special session has already been announced. Yeah.
So couldn't that have the same effect as what we were talking about could potentially happen in Texas or any state that redistricts now? He waters the districts down too much, thinking that all we need is a few points to win each district and we can turn practically the entire state red. But the independents now outnumber both registered Republicans and registered Democrats in this country, and they are the voters who are going to decide the issue.
Yeah, the polling indicates that the independents, the non-party affiliated voters, are the ones that are most upset with what's going on with the economy and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and any rational person, I think, I don't know, anybody would look at what's happening and say, this is great. I mean, the poll numbers are horrible, not just in terms of candidates like Trump or Republicans, but just, are you better off? The old Reagan statement, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? In 1 year, we're worse off.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned Jimmy Carter, and I saw this week something that caught my eye. He spoke at Senator Hubert Humphrey's funeral many years ago when Carter was president, and he quoted Mahatma Gandhi, who listed the 7 deadly sins. And let me read these to you, this quote. And then when you think about it, does this describe the Republican Party today? Here they are: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principle.
Should have been science without belief, because our administration just completely discredits science if they don't like it. They think it's going to cost them any money.
One thing there's the Al Smith dinner before every presidential race in New York. It's given by the diocese of the bishops in New York. I came across YouTube the other night, was the one with when Obama beat John McCain, and just the mutual respect they showed for each other. It seems like that was a lifetime away, but I would suggest to our listeners, just Google that. The Al Smith dinner, I guess it would have been 2008 in November. Just such mutual respect for each other. It wasn't about attacking each other. It's just Trump has taken that and just thrown it in the garbage. And I just hope we can get it back at some point.
Remember that town hall meeting where a woman got up and was calling Obama a Muslim terrorist and all this stuff, and McCain stopped her and said, "No, he's a good man." Where is that level of civility in our politics?
He boiled it down to a simple disagreement of policy.
Yeah.
If you like my policies, vote for me. If you like his, vote for him. And now the orange pedophile calls Obama the most divisive president. Gee, he's really brought us all together, hasn't he? Are you kidding me? Some people are saying we're on the verge of a civil war in this country. That's how Trump has brought us all together.
And we saw this coming. Why would anyone in 2024 think it'd be any better? Wouldn't they understand there'd be no guardrails? He wouldn't bring in cabinet members like he brought in 2016 that, Secretary of State at some point said he was an effing idiot, which is the truth. But the guardrails were coming off in 2024, and this is what we've got: chaos.
Well, this immigration policy is strictly trying to beat Obama because he had the most deportations during his time in office. And so they set this goal of 3,000 deportations a day, which is just outrageous.
And he did it without forming a Gestapo.
But that number is pegged to the Obama numbers, and they have to hit that in order to beat him. And that's what this is about. It's a game to try to prove that they are better than that black man.
You've asked Ed before, what difference might it make with House majority? Because I do agree with you that Trump doesn't follow anything, including court orders, which on bills he signed into law. But one of the problems is these Republicans, chairs of these committees, have allowed these witnesses to be non-responsive, and it's a helpless feeling for a Democrat to ask very cogent questions. That's going to change. If the chair of that committee is a Democrat, that witness cannot do that. So that is significant.
Well, you're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the great Tan Talk Radio Network. We're going to pause for a short break. I'm your host, Ed Golly. I'm joined in the studio by Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey. When we come back, we're going to talk about Trump's new grift, a $10 billion demand for, quote, reputational harm, unquote, after his income tax avoidance was exposed. That and more of the issues that the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Caregivers find the support they need on Connecting Caregivers Radio with Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver. Heard every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m., Linda and her caring and knowledgeable guests will bring you education, information, and resources, as well as a shoulder for caregivers. That's Connecting Caregivers Radio with Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver, where you can find help and hope every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Ain't it good?
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
The following is a customer review of Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater.
Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater has been in business for over 100 years. That means they've had over scamming their customers, and boy, have they mastered the craft. When I went to Dimmitt to buy a used EV, the first con they ran on me was to tell me I had 3 days to back out of any deal I made. Turned out to be a total lie. Second con was to push me into financing the car when I wanted to pay cash. That way they could sell the loan and make more money on me. Because they didn't see me as a customer to whom they would sell a car at a fair price and treat honestly, they saw me as a mark they could grift to the fullest. They even stole my $4,000 federal tax rebate. It's amazing they didn't find a way to steal the car back from me after they sold it to me. Dimmitt screwed me every way, including up and down, because I had mistakenly assumed Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater was a reputable business. So remember, if you shop Dimmitt, you'll say, damn it.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
It's time for Poll Watch here on the Voice of Reason. Crooked Donald's handling of his job as president continues to drop about a point a week, I think. His approval rating now for his overall job rating is 37%, with a disapproval rating. Whoa. As far as his policies and plans go, those who are in favor of all or most of them amount to those who say some of them are good, 20%, and few or none, 52%. More than half of those polled don't like his policies or plans. And finally, on Trump's administration's actions since taking office last year, those who think he's done better than they expected is a minuscule 21%, about as expected as a 28%, and worse than expected, again, 50%.
And, democracy requires us at some point to have faith that our fellow Americans can get it at some point. And I think that's finally happening with Trump and his administration.
We'll open the phone lines for any of those who'd like to call in today and make a comment or ask a question. By the way, did you fellas see that the Kennedy Center is going to be closed down now for 2 years, ostensibly to rebuild it after having redone it all in 2019. And the real reason, of course, is because so many of the performers simply refuse to show up now. They're so offended by Trump sticking his name on it, which Congress has not yet approved. The National Symphony Orchestra requires $35 million a year to be funded, a third of which comes from ticket sales, which are now down about, in some cases, as low as 50% of what they were a year ago, because patrons simply aren't showing up anymore. I'm afraid to envision what it would look like after seeing pictures of the inside of the Oval Office, or at least trying to make it look like Versailles or something with all the gold, the tacky gold.
Yeah, not to mention that
geez,
the East Wing is totally gone.
Yeah.
All from the guy who bankrupted 2 casinos. So, it's unbelievable that people think that he's a good businessman. Everything he touches turns to garbage.
And which goes to, why has he never released his tax returns? Does an audit go on for over 10 years, which doesn't preclude somebody from releasing him in the first place, right? Because remember in 2016, he said he would do it. Not required to, but why did he tell us he would? Why didn't he just say, no, I'm going to be the first president since, what was it, Nixon, who won't or did Kennedy release his? I don't remember, but it was back in that era when they started doing it, and everyone did it since.
Voluntarily, they did it.
Yeah, I wish Biden had been more aggressive, and I mean, the IRS could have squeezed him on that issue harder than they did.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we as Democrats, when we get power, we're much more hesitant to use it, as Republicans are. They overuse it, and maybe we perhaps underuse it. But we're learning. You kick us in the teeth enough times, I love these Republicans. Oh, now you're coming at us and whining. You made us, guys. You made us. Yeah. Get ready. There will be no bipartisanship when we get power back.
Well, Trump's poll numbers are dropping to levels that are below what he was at in the first administration, and that was caused by his blowing the whole coronavirus, epidemic. He doesn't even have that to blame now for his poor performance. All of the stuff that he's doing now is all self-inflicted. The tariffs, the alienating all of our allies, destroying the world order, the devaluation of the dollar. All of these things are his policies on full display.
It used to always be, as a child, as I grew up, and maybe you as well, I had respect for our president. I have no respect for this president. I do have respect for the Canadian prime minister. I have respect for the Ukrainian president. There are people around the world that I respect, not Trump.
Well, he did get NATO members to pony up 5% of their GDP now and participate more in that whole operation. But at the same time, he seems to be on the verge of pulling us out of it, which would be a major league catastrophe.
Well, and the NATO countries stepped up. They said, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to let them attack Greenland. That's a fellow NATO member under Denmark. So again, I have admiration for these other world leaders who have said, look, you're a bully, you're a coward by definition. Bullies are cowards. We're not going to accept it.
A man is now serving a 5-year prison sentence for leaking Trump's tax returns to the press in 2018. And he wasn't even a federal employee. He worked for a contractor, but Crooked Donald still thinks his embarrassment when we learned he's been a tax cheat for most of his life is, Trump says, so severe that the American government must give him and his 2 oldest boys a massive pile of cash. We're talking about $10 billion. I mean, his family never saw a grift it couldn't embrace, could it? Isn't that unbelievable? His net worth has been increased by $1.4 billion in his first year in office because of all the grift he's been engaged in.
Wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character. It just, every time he opens his mouth. And remember the senators who all wanted to get $500,000 each because their phone records had been subpoenaed to show what calls they made and when in the investigation of January 6th.
And could you imagine them sitting in the culture, sitting in a room and saying, let's do this. This is a good idea. This makes sense. I'm entitled to this.
Well, that went to the House, and the House thankfully said, "Are you kidding me? Are you effing kidding me? We're not doing this."
Speaking of calls, we have a caller on the line. Steve, I think I forgot to give out the number. It's 727-441-3000. Steve, thanks for calling in.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good morning. Sorry, I wasn't able to hear much of the show, but I just like to comment on the Washington Post laying off 1/3 of their staff across all departments. The very newspaper that broke the Watergate scandal. I think, having worked in the Tribune before they dissolved themselves, basically, because they were owned by a big corporation and they started making bad decisions, and now they're part of the Tampa Bay Times. I think that's a very sad thing, and now there's less watchdogs for all the crooks out there.
Yeah, Steve, we talked about, and thanks for calling in, Steve. We talked a little about Jeff Bezos last week, and he made the list, the cowards of the week. He was a gentleman that had the cowards of the week. It was one of the podcasters. But anyway, he has taken this newspaper, which when in the 70s was a fighters
newspaper of record.
That's right, and you had Woodward and Bernstein, and you had Ben Bradley, you had Katharine Graham, who stood up to power and won, and so many journalists went into journalism because of that. And you have Bezos coming in, not just kissing Trump's tail, and ruining that newspaper, but then paying a ton of money for this Melania movie, which just is nothing more than another Kardashian reality show. But it's sad to see a newspaper like that's gone down.
And Bezos personally earns enough money in a week to keep those people employed for a quarter.
I thought it was a whole year.
A whole
or something.
year,
Yeah.
It's astounding how much money he makes personally, that he could run this at a loss for years and years
for the rest of his life.
Never run out of money.
$140 billion net worth.
Well, you come across as, I don't care how much money you have, your reputation matters, and he's coming across as just a coward. And like you said, that the amount of money we're talking about is chump change to him. But I subscribe to that paper for number one. I grew up in that area, so I used to read it as a child and as a teenager. But I was getting it even last year on my phone. And I was noticing that the opinion writers that I wanted to read were no longer there. And I said, maybe I'd go back and I'd scroll again. And they were leaving because they didn't want to be any part of this.
Another issue is how this administration is affecting science itself, whether it's cutting funding for research to the major universities so he can take control of them, or what he's doing with fossil fuels. Let's listen to Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse explain how the fossil fuel industry is rigging the electricity grid in a scheme to keep their industry profitable at the expense of progress and clean energy.
It's not just a cost, it's a scheme. The fossil fuel industry contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to Donald Trump. They drive grids across the country up the stack to more expensive fossil fuel plants. Those more expensive fossil fuel plants set a higher price for consumers, so consumers have to pay more. And that extra money goes where? It goes to the fuel dealers and the operators of those fossil fuel plants that would otherwise be sitting idle because they're too expensive and inefficient and polluting to run. It is a direct transfer of millions and millions and millions of dollars out of the pockets of ratepayers and customers to the big fossil fuel donors
of Trump.
Yeah, and not only is it affecting the prices that consumers are paying, but it's really hurting the auto industry. The auto industry, and worldwide, about 25% of new cars that are being sold globally are electric vehicles. And that number is rising. Yet, because Trump wants to take us back to fossil fuels and clean coal and all this other crap, they're forcing these companies to look at their business model and say, well, wait a minute, we have to change. So Ford, for example, they were making an all-electric F-150, the most popular selling truck in the country, they've stopped producing that vehicle, and it's cost them $19.5 billion to change their EV business.
To retool for
Yeah. And then GM, citing a loss of tax incentives, switched one plant from EVs to gas-powered SUVs and pickups, taking a $6 billion hit as a result. So do the math. That's $25.5 billion in costs between just two of these companies. And Trump's trying to hold back the tide of technology and harming jobs and the climate and our health in the process.
What the heck is wrong with progress, Kevin?
Well,
What's wrong with progress?
What's sad about that is I'm listening to you. It's all about greed. Remember the old gecko, greed is good. It's really disgusting to see in this country that there's a certain percentage of the billionaires and the rich that Trump kowtows to and that support him. That to the extent, and these aren't idiots. If they're that, other than the ones that maybe inherited money, but a lot of these people are bright people. They know that we're lagging, and that the technology that you just mentioned, Ed, and we're against it, and as well as the ecological issues as well. But they do not care. They don't care. We're lagging on this issue. There's no question that the fossil fuel is yesterday's news. There's no question that there's climate issues. They don't care. They don't give a damn.
And Trump hates windmills. You remember he tried to block a project that was nearly complete out in Rhode Island. Well, a federal judge ruled a few weeks ago that work on that offshore wind farm for Rhode Island and Connecticut can resume, handing the industry at least a temporary victory, as Crooked Donald does everything in his power to shut it down. The judge said the government did not explain why it could not take action short of a complete stop to construction on Revolution Wind while it considers ways to mitigate its national security concerns. He said it also did not provide sufficient reasoning for its change in position. Revolution Wind has received all of its federal permits and is nearly 90% complete to provide power for Rhode Island and Connecticut. Crooked Donald said his goal is to not let any windmills be built. He wants to keep us in the coal age. This is ridiculous because the rest of the world is moving forward with green energy, and we're going to be a country that's still shoveling coal.
So why don't Republicans stand up and say that we don't agree with you, Trump? We know you're wrong about the science. Why don't they?
Why don't any corporations stand up to him? It's unbelievable to me that the way that the richest people in this country, if you're a billionaire, you have the power, the financial power to fight back and speak out, and none of them are doing it to our country's detriment.
Well, and with Trump, he has a history as what happened ultimately with Epstein of if you push back hard enough, you can win, because he will back down. He backs down all the time if you have the courage to stand up to him.
And the worst part is administrations change, so we figure maybe we can look forward to a day when a president comes in who understands science and economics and international relations and history and so on. But on the David Frum show, David Brooks, who's a commentator and opinion columnist for the New York Times, expands on what he perceives as the permanent damage that the orange pedophile has done to the presidency.
One of the things I think about and worry about is I don't think we're ever going back to a pre-Trump presidency, which we had presidencies that were self-restrained, and they were restrained by norms, they were restrained by laws. But the presidents, I would interview them all, and I asked one president on his final day in office, "What'd you learn being president that you didn't know before?" And he said, "I learned there's a lot of passive-aggressive behavior in government. The president says something and nothing happens." And those were the restraints that were built into the system. Donald Trump has shown you can crash through all those restraints, both the legal and normative ones. And I have trouble believing any future president is going to want to give back all that power. And so we could be walking, whoever wins, we could be walking into an age where presidential power is ramped up and congressional power continues to deteriorate, which is a primary distortion of our system of government.
Yeah, it's a primary distortion of our system of government because the Constitution, Article 1, created Congress. It was supposed to be the most influential branch of government because we didn't want a king. Okay, we wanted representative government elected by the people that are governed, and so that's why Congress was the first thing out of the gate in the Constitution. And then the executive was the second thing, and then the courts were the third. And it's shameful that Congress has done what they've done. The Senate, by confirming all these people to the cabinet that were wholly unqualified, there has been a norm that the president should pick their team, but the Congress is supposed to say, you know what? Go get another player because this guy can't dribble. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, it used to be that when there was a competent person put up, there was, there was some deference given to the president, and the numbers would be, 94-6 or whatever. These incompetents, the numbers were 51-49, 52-48.
Yeah.
These people barely were confirmed, because of and it was not because of partisanship. It was because of incompetence. And we predicted this, not so much but we saw this coming. And what's happened? What we thought would happen is exactly what's happened. Sadly, people have died because of that, and people are in poverty. It's affected many, many people in this country.
Yeah,
but we saw it coming.
You get Kristi Noem, you get RFK Jr., you get Whiskey Pete Hegseth, all of these people that should be nowhere near the positions of power that they have.
And the agencies, and you've mentioned this before, Gary, have been gutted. The effects of this, we're just dealing with the crisis, somebody being murdered on a street, which is what happened twice in Minnesota. But the long-term effects of research, you mentioned, we talked about, in energy and the winds and the sun, you mentioned last week, the solar industry. The long-term effects are going to be hard to change.
And China and others are just saying, fine, you want to be stupid, be stupid. We're going to go ahead and progress. And it's really hurting us as the dominant power that we were. We are no longer the dominant power, and it's trending in the wrong direction.
We have another caller. Max is checking in with us. Thanks for checking in.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking my call. I wanted to know at this point, what would be the best or front runner in running against Trump in the next, or sorry, not against Trump, but against whoever the Republican candidate is on the Democratic side for the next presidential election?
Max, that's a very good question. Do you have an opinion about that before we give you our opinions?
Not really. I have a hard time looking at the field there and really seeing anyone who stands out.
Well, Gavin Newsom has certainly stepped up. I know there's criticism of him being a liberal Democrat from California, but he's certainly stepped up and made a name for himself to the extent people didn't know who he was. I think he's been helped by all of this.
Okay.
J.B. Pritzker is another one that stood up. To me, it's the people that have the moral conviction to not cower, and actually, if they are elected, to be bold going forward, because we're going to have that to try to repair the damage with our allies and the things that have been done to make our Justice Department, for example, is going to have to be completely rebuilt, because it's just a shadow of what it should be.
Gary, Jimmy Carter got elected on 6 words after Nixon. I will not lie to you. Period. It's perceptions.
Yeah. Well,
so thank you for calling in, Max. We appreciate you taking the time to call us.
Thank you, man.
Keep listening, my friend.
Andy Beshear, who was the governor, is the governor of Kentucky.
Oh, sorry.
Is another one that has been elected in a red state overwhelmingly. It gets stuff done.
And that's why governors tend to be more of a breeding ground than senators. Michigan's governor is very, very popular.
The problem with senators running for president is that because of the number of votes that they have to take, and a lot of the votes that they take at different stages of the legislative process can be inconsistent, those get plastered on them as being a flip-flopper or whatever. And it's a whole different ball game when you have to actually run a state, and make the decisions and be in charge of the National Guard and operate within a balanced budget. All of those things that states have to do. It really is a better proving ground for governors.
Yeah, the other thing, a senator has, or a representative, you got a lot of votes that can be used against you when you run. A governor doesn't quite have that problem. But we mentioned Josh Shapiro. This isn't, the saying that problems create opportunities. This is a great opportunity. You mentioned at the beginning of the show last week, Ed, about amongst this nightmare, and you recall saying that there's been this opportunity for a very positive thing to occur, which I think is happening within the Democrats and independents too. And in this country, it really isn't about party. It's about this country saying enough is enough.
But it always goes back to they don't want to run against somebody. They want to run for something and represent something and assert that they can change the economy and our attitude toward green energy and all these other things that they've got to deal with. And that's what they've got to put on the table. This brings us to our quote for the day. It's from a fellow named Ben Franklin, who never was a president. He said, "Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins." Well, stay with us for national and international news for CBS News. Join us again next Thursday morning at 9 o'clock for another edition of The Voice of Reason. Thanks to my co-hosts Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey. Ed Golly reminding you, if the statement seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting. I'm Steve.